All right. Good luck. All right. So I want to share with you a few stories from Rabbi Berel Levy. Berel Levy, he was the director of the OK, the OK kosher symbol, and he had many different missions that the Rebbe sent him on because of his traveling throughout the world. He had to travel because of the various products that were made throughout the world in order to give a kosher authorization, the OK. So he traveled to many, many places. And it's unbelievable the kind of missions that the Rebbe would give him during his various journeys. You see the idea of, in the language of this week's Torah portion, Rosh Bnei Yisrael. He sees the Rosh Bnei Yisrael, the idea of the head of the Jewish people. Just like the head is sensitive to all different parts of the body, in a similar way, the idea of a Rebbe is he's a Rosh Bnei Yisrael and sensitive to every single Jew in the world. Sounds incredible, but this is the fact. And here are a few stories that he shared, Rabbi Berel Levy, all the shalom. Rabbi Berel Levy was sent because of his kashrus agency to Russia during the time of communism. And there's actually, could hear this, there's it's on YouTube, a recording of Rabbi Berel Levy with a Jew named Abgetcha. Abgetcha was a chassid who lived in Russia. I don't remember which city, it was Moscow. And Rabbi Berel Levy calls him up. There's a recording of the conversation. You hear it, it's in Yiddish. And he says to him, Zeide will wissen, Farvos nimmt es Yankel sein Medizin. The Zeide was the term that Chassidim in Russia would use to refer to the Rebbe. Since he's calling from the United States, so of course the KGB is scrutinizing conversations from someone calling the United States to someone who is anyway suspect of going against the Russian government because of their activity in keeping Torah mitzvahs. People who wear beards are especially suspect. So Rabbi Berel Levy calls him up and he uses the term in the conversation. He says, the grandfather is calling. Grandfather wants to know how come Yankel isn't taking his medicine. Apparently, I just heard the conversation. It sounds like to me that Yankel had diabetes, and Yankel needed to have insulin, and Yankel didn't want to take the insulin. So Getcha answers the phone. He says, I tried to convince him. He doesn't want to take the insulin. So Rabbi Levy says, you have to give him the message. The message is that Zayda wants to know how come he's not taking the insulin. So Rabbi Levy explains to him exactly what the Rebbe's words are and how he's supposed to say it. It goes back and forth a few times until Rabbi Getcha, this older man, understands the message. He's going to give over to Yankel, explain to Yankel who has diabetes, why it's so important for him to have insulin. That's just mind-boggling. The Rebbe is in New York, and he's sending a message because Yankel's not taking his insulin. That's story number one. Ready for story number two, Rosie? Okay, story number two was like this. Berel Levy went to the Philippines. Years ago, it became popular in the United States, banana chips. And he went to the Philippines to supervise a company that wanted to get the OK symbol, OK supervision on their banana chips. So Berel Levy went to the Philippines to check out to see if this product was met up to their standards. And as often, always, before he would go to travel to any country, he would write a letter to them. And the Rebbe would always give a blessing. And the Rebbe would send dollars for shlichus mitzvah. So the Rebbe would send dollars as a customary. When someone goes on a trip, you send $1 So the person should put the dollar into tzedakah. That way, the whole trip is transformed into a mitzvah. In addition to the dollar, in addition to the blessing, the Rebbe also gave him a check of $180 and told him it's worthwhile that you should speak to the community in the Philippines and give them a donation from the Rebbe for their community. That's what, hold on a second. Not connected, hold on. So he goes to this banana chip company, and he discovers that the owner of the company is a Sephardic Jew, and sure enough, as he suspected, although people thought that banana chips would be the problem is banana, but actually the oil that was used for the making of these banana chips was also oil that was used for non-kosher products as well, the same oil, and so in order to make these banana chips kosher, there had to be a whole change of the operation, and he was able to fix that issue. Then he tells this Sephardic Jew that he has a mission from the Rebbe, and he needs to speak to the community there. So this Jew, who is the owner of this company, says, "Oh, I have a great idea for you. My uncle is actually a shochet. He does kosher ritual slaughter, and he is a very distinguished member of the community, and I'm sure he could help you to connect to the community." His uncle was from Baghdad, a shochet. Yeah, okay. So he goes to this shul. And unfortunately, this shul did not have a mechitza. The men and women daven there together. So Rabbi Levy, of course, couldn't pray there. And after the prayers were over, he asked permission to speak, and he spoke. He said, "First of all, before I speak, I want to share with you, I have to apologize to you why I didn't pray with you." And he tells him the following story. He says there was a Jew who was living in the Lower East Side of New York. He moved to Long Island. And in Long Island, there was a Reform temple. And he wanted to, he wasn't used to it. He was a religious man, but he needed, there was no other, at that time, there was no other synagogue there. So he wanted to join the temple. So he goes to the president of the temple, and he tells the president that he wants to join. He wants to be a member of the temple. The president looks at him. The president sees this guy is religious. He doesn't have many people in his community with beards and this and a hat that doesn't fit. So the president says, "I'll send you an application. Send you an application." So weeks go by, and he doesn't get any application to become a member in the synagogue. So he happens to meet the president somewhere in the neighborhood, and he asked the president, I was upset. You didn't send me an application. But I had a dream about God last night. God came to me in a dream, and God said to me, in the dream, I told God, I'm upset that I wanted to become part of this community, and they don't let me in. And God said, "Don't worry, they don't let me in there either." In other words, it says in the Torah, God says, "Make for me a sanctuary, I'll dwell within you." So the sanctuary has to be made according to the rules of God, according to God's plan. Since in order for a synagogue to be kosher, the men and women have to sit separately. As in the laws of kosher, meat and milk are both kosher items, but they're mixed together, it's not kosher. A similar way, men and women are both important parts, equally important parts of the synagogue, but there has to be separation. That's the words that Rabbi Levy shared, and his words resonated. The community heard, and they actually resolved to build a mechitza, to make a separation, and they used Rebbe's check for this. And not only did they use Rebbe's check for this, but this actually caused a whole domino effect, many positive things that happened in this community. Before I share the positive thing that happened in this community as a result of this, the mikveh that was built and the mechitza that was built, I'll share one more story. I'll get back to the Philippines in a second. Rabbi Berel Levy, Shalom Aleichem, Smachso David. Rabbi Berel Levy was, as he was in the Philippines and he finished speaking, there was a young man in the audience who comes over to him and says to him, I heard that you were visiting our community, and I have a really important request from you. And please, don't leave me empty-handed. Please go and fulfill my request. What's your request? He says, I am from New York, and I don't have such good grades. And I wanted to get into medical school in New York. I couldn't get into medical school in New York. So the only place I can get into was here in the Philippines. And he says, I'm going back to New York in 2 months. And I want my parents to be ready to hear how I found the love of my life. I'm going to marry this Filipino woman. And I want my parents to be ready to handle this because I know they're religious and they won't be upset. They won't be able to handle it. I want you to please brace them for this news. So Rabbi Levy said, you're going to break their hearts. Here, your parents gave all this money to support you in school, and you're going to turn your back on them and do this to them. How can you do this to them? But his words fell on deaf ears. And Rabbi Levy came back to New York, and the first thing he did, he called up this boy's parents, and he said to them, your son's coming back in 2 months, and he has a present for you. He needs to talk to you about it. The parents come over. He said, I believe he said, the father of this boy fainted. The mother couldn't handle it. They're so grief-stricken. Anyways, the mother begs him, please call up our son, try to convince him, speak to him again. He said, I spoke to him already. They asked him, please speak to him. And make a long story short, he spoke to the boy, he called him again, and Baruch Hashem, he was successful in convincing him to let go of this relationship, which is a miracle in itself, and it was all a result of the Rebbe's instruction to him to go speak to the community in the Philippines. Another occasion, Rabbi Levy was going to Copenhagen, and he went to send a letter to the Rebbe that he wants to go to Copenhagen because of his kosher agency. The Rebbe said to him, they should check out the mikveh in Copenhagen and make sure the mikveh in Copenhagen is kosher. Okay? So he goes to Copenhagen, and he was only there for a day, and he wants to get a key to the mikveh to see what the mikveh was like. But unfortunately, he couldn't get the key to the mikveh, and he had to leave. He leaves, and he couldn't do the mission that I've asked him to do. A year passes, and again, he has to go to Copenhagen. And again, he writes to the Rebbe a year later. He tells the Rebbe that he's going to Copenhagen, he wants a bracha. The Rebbe says to him, please make sure to find out the status of the mikveh and make sure the mikveh is kosher. Okay, now he forgot all about this. But here a year later, but again, reminding him, make sure the mikveh is kosher. So here he decided it can't be that he's going to miss out on this. And so he made sure that he have enough time to ascertain whether the mikveh was kosher or not. And he went there and he got a hold of the key and he went in the mikveh. And he noticed that there was some kind of an issue with the water in the mikveh. In order for mikveh to be kosher, the rainwater and the tap water have to be connected, and very often there's an issue, depending on how the mikveh is built, with the connection between the rainwater and the tap water, and if it's not connected in the right way, the mikveh is not kosher. Another critical issue in the mikveh is that if the mikveh has any cracks in it, the water's seeping out of the mikveh. Depending on the speed of how fast the water is evaporating, the water is seeping out of the mikveh. Again, it's called zoichel, flowing water, and the mikveh is not kosher. So this mikveh had two issues. One issue with the hashaka wasn't properly connected to the rainwater. And number two, the water was eichlin. It was an obvious issue. And so he couldn't figure out how anyone would make this mikveh kosher. So he asked them who was the rabbi who gave the certification of the mikveh. He discovered a certain rabbi in London. It's not important what his name is. He went to London and he visited with this rabbi and he asked the rabbi about the mikveh in Copenhagen. Did you get the certificate? He says, yes, I gave the certification. And I told him there's two issues they have to do. They have to lower the hole that connects to rainwater, the tap water, and this will solve the issue also with the crack. And again, they told me exactly how to make the mikveh kosher. So Rabbi Levy said, did you ever tell the Rebbe about this? He says, no, I never wrote to Rebbe in my life. So unbelievably, the Rebbe sent a message to Rabbi Levy about the mikveh in Copenhagen without ever being told about the issue, and yet the Rebbe sensed this issue and sent him specifically to correct the issue with the mikveh in Copenhagen. Rabbi Levy once wrote to Rebbe about another trip to the Philippines, and Rebbe told him something very interesting. Rebbe said that since you have been successful in the Philippines in helping them with creating a mechitza, separation between men and women during their prayers, and you've been successful also in building a mikveh there, you should check out and make sure that not only do they have a mikveh and a mechitza, they should make sure that there is also a moyel, there's also someone to do circumcision as well in the Philippines. Okay? So he goes to the Philippines and he discovers that the community has recently hired someone to be their chazan, to be their cantor, and to be their moyel, to do circumcisions. So he wasn't sure what his role was. He already had a moyel, but the Rebbe asked about this, so he started speaking to the moyel. And the moyel said that he had an interesting story that a few weeks before. He said that he got a call from Kobe in Japan, and there was an Israeli man who worked for Sims or Boeing, some company, an Israeli company in Japan, and they had a baby, and they wanted this moyel from the Philippines to travel to Kobe to do a bris. But then the guy sent another telegram and said, "It's okay, we don't need it." So he called up and he found out that the guy in Kobe, instead of having a Jew be the moyel, he had a non-Jewish doctor to be the moyel for his son. Now, there are three components in order for a bris to be kosher. One is that the foreskin has to be removed, of course. There is then the mitzvah of the bris milah itself, and also that the person should remain a mohel, that the foreskin is removed, not just temporarily, but stays that way, and that besides that, there's another mitzvah of the actual circumcision. So while the doctor is able to make sure that the foreskin is removed and that the person is in the category of someone who does not have the oral, does not have the foreskin, but he still hasn't done the mitzvah of circumcision. In order to satisfy that, there's a painless procedure called a tafas b'tam bris, where the person who has already been circumcised is now does the mitzvah of circumcision without an actual circumcision, but just with this procedure called a tafas b'tam bris. So Rabbi Levy is thinking, if the Rebbe sent me to the Philippines to find out about circumcision, maybe the reason I'm being sent over here is because of what's going on in Kobe. And actually, the next week, Rabbi Levy had to travel to Tokyo, to Japan. And he decided, instead of spending Shabbos in Tokyo, as he originally planned, he's going to spend Shabbos in Kobe. In Kobe, there was a similar situation to the Philippines. And again, there he went to Kobe. He shared that dream, the story of the guy who moved to Long Island, and he told the community that a baby doesn't have any can't make any decisions for itself. A baby can only do what the parents do. The baby is in the hands of the parents. And he said, can you imagine, when you give a child a bris, you're giving him a blessing for his entire life. And instead of giving a child a bris, giving a child over to a non-Jewish doctor, you're taking it from the child opportunity of this mitzvah for his whole life. Make a long story short, he met with the head of the company that employed this gentleman who had exchanged the mail for a doctor, and they assured him that in the future they'll make sure to only use a mail and not to use a surgeon for circumcision. But all these stories of Rabbi Levy all underscore the same thing, that wherever a Jew may be in the world, Hashem gives in every generation a Moshe Rabbeinu, someone like Moses, who senses the needs of every Jew, like a shepherd senses the needs of his sheep, and that the Jew has to feel that, Le'amin Yisrael Achman al-Islam. The Jewish people aren't orphaned. They have a Rebbe whose blessing is a blessing, whose word is a word. And Rosie, who do you want to come right now? All right, Mashiach. I want Mashiach to come right now. And that's the story I wanted to share. Any questions or comments? All right. A good Vach, a freiliche Vach.